It's if you click the first link of any Wikipedia page in English, and it can't be a link that's in brackets because they're typically about like how do you pronounce the word or the etymology of the word. It's just sort of the first blue link in a body of text in Wikipedia, excluding brackets. And you click that, and it will take you to a page, and you just keep reiterating that. Keep clicking the first link of any Wikipedia page, and you always get back to philosophy. And then people ask, okay, but you can just keep going. And you're like, yeah, you can. And so if you get to philosophy, you keep clicking the first link and you circle back. And so philosophy is this point where to be specific, a 2016 study said that 97% of all Wikipedia pages in English Wikipedia lead back to philosophy. And once you get to philosophy, you just keep infinitely cycling back. I always thought it was an interesting fact because it's like, oh, that's cool. When I went to research it for a video, I saw that other cultures, other Wikipedia in other languages goes to different concepts. So I think it said German, French, and Russian all go back to philosophy. From memory, like Germanic, Dutch and some other languages similar go back to knowledge. And then in East Asian languages, they cycle back to things like earth and humanity. And it's interesting because I think I didn't really see a deeper explanation about this anywhere on the internet. But like my intuition says like, wait, that's more interesting than I think it is at face value. Because it's like, yeah, okay, but like, why this one? Why is it this word that our Wikipedia in my language like goes to? So for English, obviously it's philosophy. And it's like, you think about it and you're like, okay, it kind of makes sense. Like Wikipedia is this big database of knowledge. And, you think in essence, like all forms of knowledge are kind of like they're related to philosophy. It feels like that anyway. And so I think it makes intuitive sense. And I can also understand why some languages might have knowledge as the sort of what I call the draining point to Wikipedia. But what I think is interesting is in these other cultures where they cycle back to topics like language. That was another one. So Polish and Japanese both go back to language. So language seems to be this fundamental concept, or does all of our knowledge come from the human or our relationship with the earth? So my presumption is that each Wikipedia in all these different languages has this sort of what I call a drainage point. It's like where they sort of most of these pages all link back to this one spot, and you get there and it might cycle back. And I presume that this page represents maybe like the most fundamental concept that a culture structures its knowledge around. I think it's a cool idea. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's so much we can unpack here. That's why we wanted to start with this, and you've explained it so brilliantly there. So thank you. Yeah, one of the notes I made when I was looking at what you've done about this was it does point to that field of study or approach to knowledge or the world, being philosophy, is the foundation of our culture. And there is something in that, and it's interesting that it intuitively makes sense that it's philosophy. If chemistry is a really important field of study, it's essential. It makes up the molecules of all matter, and it can teach us so much, and it's so complex and comprehensive, but it wouldn't make sense of it being the core of everything, to me anyway. I mean, people may disagree. It's something in philosophy that makes sense, that it's the study of knowledge and experience, and the experience of acquiring knowledge. And it makes me think of, I just want to add this point before I pass on to Jacob and things like that, that I find studying psychology and philosophy most interesting to me because I think they are most applicable to life. I think natural sciences tell us what the world is and how it functions, which is essential. I'm not downplaying that whatsoever. But I think psychology and philosophy teach us how we can exist in that world. And the world we actually live in, the internal world of the mind or the psyche or whatever term you want to put in place there. And that's why it appeals to me so much. And that's why it makes sense to me that all the learnings about the external world and history and politics and physics and all this stuff we might find on Wikipedia at some point all drains back to the philosophy of knowledge and the experience of acquiring knowledge and wisdom, which sits in philosophy. So it makes sense. What do you think, Jacob? Any thoughts?
Yeah, I guess I'm thinking, well, what is philosophy? Philosophy is like a kind of commitment to like the love of learning, or maybe the pursuit of truth, or and then like the big questions like how do you live a good life? Why am I here? And it does make sense to be the baseline of every other single question that's built on that. I guess I'm interested in that. Like, uh, it's interesting that you picked Wikipedia to do this sort of big sort of search on, because Wikipedia is sort of published by humans sort of openly, and I guess I'm s- I'm contemplating whether if you did the same search on like the most Googled words or on Google, or like the most common things on ChatGPT, if that would all go back to philosophy as well. Like, is it a sense of like, what is the problem that people are trying to solve? And then on those sort of different web browsers and the sort of search pages, like, is it going to be the same problem there? Um, or is it all going to lead back to the same problem with philosophy, which is like how to live a good life, essentially? And then I guess it's interesting as well that like I don't think out of any of those ones that you mentioned that like science was really up there, um, or if
Mm,
like art was one of the main searches. So I'm curious if you have any sort of more thoughts on what
mm.
me and Joel said there.
Well, yeah, I tried. So with this Wikipedia philosophy phenomenon, it's called. I tried it myself in other languages, and so there's on the official Wikipedia page about this Wikipedia philosophy phenomenon. It says that a lot of East Asian languages go to concepts like humanity and Earth. I tried it myself and found it inconsistent, and that some did actually go to the natural sciences. It didn't finish at um, the Wikipedia page for the natural sciences, but it might sort of loop back on things like states of matter, or like the solar system, or so some did. And I would say though that you're probably best being like a little bit cautious with some languages that don't have as many Wikipedia pages. I tried it in Vietnamese, and I don't read Vietnamese, but I just kept clicking the first link and like using Google to translate the page so I knew where I was taking me. And uh, yeah, I couldn't get it to sort of cycle back to anything. It actually would sort of take me around. So um, yeah, it is interesting. I do think though, like, yeah, like why philosophy? I think I kind of always come back to this. Another thing, I think a few things in this world are pretty interesting. I'm always fascinated by like PhD. I never questioned it, and then I was like, what does that mean, PhD? And it's short for like a doctorate in philosophy. And I'm like, oh, cool. Wait, but you get a PhD for like anything that isn't what I was taught is philosophy. So why? And it's like, oh, because I guess if you go back far enough, all these pursuits of knowledge are just technically forms of philosophy. And then you break it down. I like to sort of, break things into their etymology, and like philosophy is, ancient Greek word just meaning for the love of wisdom. Um, and Sophia is wisdom, and philos, to love, was we get the word phile, which is used in another word, meaning love. But yeah, it does seem to me to make a lot of sense. But then I guess it opens up the question of, as an English speaker, it to me, I'm like, yeah, clearly, like, philosophy seems to underpin all forms of knowledge. But then I guess, like, if you think about it, language could be true as well, because how do you philosophize without a language? And so is language more fundamental? Um, but how do you speak language without a human? So is humanity the most fundamental thing? I think, it's kind of all cycling back in that, like, well, okay, but what justifies humanity's like specialness is, our philosophical intuition. So then it's like, oh, well, we're back at philosophy. So I don't know. It's like, I don't think there maybe could be just like one objectively right answer of which is the best like sort of thing to build all of your knowledge around. But to me, I think just straight up philosophy makes sense.